Also, I want to give you some statistics. Overview, roughly, for a number of personnel members. Of course, we have to remember that some of the member countries are not always very exact in the way they report the figures. So you can say roughly we are growing from 57,800 to 59,200. That is roughly, in my head, nearly 60,000 over the last 5 years. And that just shows that we have not been growing over the last years. And this is maybe something to think of and something that I also will come back to. Because if we look at the number of horses, we can see that there is a tendency that we are growing. I don't know exactly why this is like it described it is here, because we saw from before that the number of foals are also growing, so it shouldn't go down here, but maybe this is wrong, I don't know. But this is just to give an idea about that we are steadily getting more and more horses. It's also funny to see that the number of clubs are growing. And that might be because many or more and more people want to organize themselves in clubs. And basically I think that is a very positive thing. But also here we can see that the positive development are mainly in specific countries. And other countries, for example, the Netherlands, they simply don't have the club structure like you know here in Iceland or Denmark, for example. The Netherlands are divided into a region, or into 6 regions, and then they are related in some way that I don't exactly know how it's organized, but then they are related to the Netherlands stock book, and then they have this very funny situation that to be able to register an Icelandic horse in the Netherlands, you have to be a member of the association. And then they can clearly see that a lot of people are, the year that they are buying a horse, then they register as a member, and if they don't buy another horse the next year, then they stop to be a member. Because then they don't feel that they have any interest of being a member. And this is of course something that could be a little complicated, that we have different aspects of how we are organized in the different countries. If we then try to look a little broader and look at the horse industry, so to say, in Europe, then it is based upon information from European Horse Network. I will come back and give a little more information about that, what that is. But there you can see that the economic impact from the horse industry is 100 billion euro. I don't know how much that is in Icelandic kroner, but it's a lot. And this just shows how big the influence from the horse industry are. It's also counted that it generates 400,000 people working full-time from the horse industry. Also we know that there are 6 million or more horses in Europe, and that means that roughly the Icelandic horse is less than 4% of all the horses in Europe. This also shows us that if we calculate at least a little on these figures, that when we have 15 horses in Europe, then we can employ 1 person. And this is of course interesting when we're talking about politics in more general terms, that how much influence does the horse industry have on the horse market and on the development in Europe. Another very important thing is also to say that roughly we have 6 million hectares of permanent grassland given over to horse grazing or feeding, making corn and grass, etc. for the horses. And this is also very important to secure that we keep this land for these purposes. Because this is of course a part of the future, and I'll come back to that when we're talking about later on riding in the nature, but because that is of course not maybe the same land, but this is a question about how we from the horse industry can influence on the use of land to support our wishes and future with the horses. And then also it's calculated that the number of horse riders in Europe in general has been growing with approximately 5% per year over the last many years. But this was, as you remember before, not counting for us. We more or less had 57, 58, 59,000, so we are not growing over the last 5 years. Scandinavian countries, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, then 18% of the horses in Norway are Icelandic horses, 14 and 11%. In Norway, there is 45,000 horses, and 8,000 of them roughly is Icelandic horses, and so on. But in Germany, it's only 6% of the horses. And going to further south to Austria, but also north to Finland and Switzerland, we can see that it's 3%, in the Netherlands 2%, all the other countries less than 1%. And when you know that, for example, in France and Great Britain, in these two countries there is roughly 1 million horses, and less than 1% of these horses are Icelandic horses, then it just shows us that if we're looking at these countries, there is a huge market. I don't think that this can improve very much. I mean, also if you calculate the number of people living in these three countries, then it's less than 20 million people living there, way of doing it or whatever. But I think that these figures are making a lot of good questions and a lot of things to discuss and think about. If we then look a little at the export of the Icelandic horses, then we can say that, or I'll just start to say that this is an estimation based upon information from WorldFengur. That means that from Iceland there has been exported nearly 1,200 horses, and the number of export for the other countries. To that I should add that this also, because of the registration of WorldFengur, is if a horse has been moved to another country, if the person are moving to another country, then the registration has changed. So this is not 100% description of export, but it is probably on more or less the right level that this is the export. So this is just showing a little about how the horses are moving from one country to another. If I then should have a little water. Go on and tell a little about what's going on at the moment in FEIF. This is just an overview, and I come back to it. We have the task force process. We have some work starting about disciplinary rules and standards. Of course, we have the WorldFengur continuously going on, the FEIF Matrix, the youth, riding in nature, I will come very much back to that. We have the discussion on the future running of World Championship and Landsmót. And then in general, so to say, how about the future? What are we going to do and what do we want? Talking about the task force. The idea with the task force was to create a process that should contribute to a positive development within FEIF and the member countries. And we want, in many ways, to involve the member countries and force them to take a responsibility in the process. We should, in this process, of course, focus on horse welfare, and we should, in this process, end up with an updating and evaluating of the FEIF, so that we find out how is our rules, can we improve our rules, in which direction do we want to go, and also update them, because in some of the rules there are certain sentences that are not very good written and could be misunderstood. And I mean, over the years, the rules has been changed. So what we are asking for is not to change the rule in general, but just to update it, and through this process see if we could develop it further or come back to some older standards in the different eras and different competitions. And for that we have appointed a group which we call the task force group, and it's very important to emphasize that this group is only responsible for the process and not for the content in the rules. This is up to the committee members in the FEIF committees, and of course the member countries to decide and give input to the rules. The task force group is only responsible for the running of the process, and the running of the process is described here, because last year we started up with survey, We have made several interviews which we are collecting to try to get ideas and try to make a kind of a summarize of what are people talking about. And later, probably within 1 or 2 weeks, we will publish a summary of the answer we got on the questionnaire. And this will be a part of the basis for discussions, how to carry on. And then we are in 2011, and there we will of course present some of the conclusions and also involve and try to bring ownership to the member countries at the conference, and maybe then later on during 2011 we will work on a draft for a new FEIF and FEIF. And that does not mean that we will change the system and cancel T1 and page rates or whatever. This is of course not the idea, but it is the idea to be sure that we have an open discussion and that people cannot come afterwards and say, why didn't you ask us about this and why shouldn't we change this, etc., etc. So therefore it's very important to have a very clear and simple but open process around it. And during that process it will of course be relevant to involve some specialists in certain areas, veterinarians in specific questions, or trainers and riders, etc., etc. But also again I would say that this is not the task force, and it's not the president going out and ask him and her, what do you think, etc., etc. It's very much up to the countries to take part in this process, also to you to take part in this process. Then the discussion should continue, and of course, depending on how far we are coming, in 2012 we will have also to follow up on it and try to summarize it into a more finished version of the FEIF and FEIF. And then maybe plan to make some test disciplines. Find a way to organize another way of, for example, the T1. I belong to the group that doesn't like that the T1 final is taking such a long time. And normally the last part is ending up with a long and very tough race for the horses, and one asking oneself, what's going on here? I mean, I want to see beautiful, fast talk, but I don't want to see a race or something like that. And that could be an idea for trying to say, okay, this year let's appoint 10 or whatever tournaments around Europe, try to make some other guidelines and then go into it and test it in real life, instead of having people sitting, of course working with a full heart, but still sitting on the table and talking about it. Let's try to test it. And if we all agree that this could be a good idea, then we could use 2012 to test something, and then finally in 2013, if we are ready, then we could present a proposal for FEIF and FEIF. If we are not ready, then we just have to delay it for another year and take another year for it. I mean, for me, it is not that important if we finish in 2013 or 14. The important thing is to find the right process and involving specialists and also get ownership in the countries to this. To disciplinary rules. Like I said before, we made the changes in the statutes a year ago, and we decided there that we were not looking at all into the disciplinary rules in the statutes and the FEIF, but this is of course very relevant, following the line from the task force, to make a proposal for how we go on with this. And Gunnar is involved in that, I'm also, and 1 or 2 other persons are also involved in that. And what we have been talking about so far, and Gunnar will make a presentation of that at the conference, is that we of course need to secure that we have international rules in the statutes of FEIF. Related to that, we have the rules in the FEIF. So that's the rules, so to say, on the international level. And next to that, we need to make a description of the standards that we want each country to fulfill, so that they can confirm that we have standards in our own country where we secure that there is a proper process if a disciplinary case comes up, everything is written down. You have 2 levels and a possibility to appeal. You have a serious way of how you handle the case, and there's a public element in it, and all these things. More, so to say, more general standards that secure that everybody can say that if a disciplinary case are handled in a country, then the country can stand up and say it is done following these standards. We cannot make exactly the same rules because there are different aspects in the different countries. Some has relations to national sport associations, like you have here, for example. Others doesn't have any rule at all. Also, so we cannot say that you have to do it like this. But if we can describe some standards that are fair, understandable, and generally accepted, then we should be able to make a system that can bring us further on, and that we hopefully will not have too many of these cases, of course. This is also an issue where we are seeing, or that is at least what I am hearing, that we are seeing a growing number of situations where riders are accusing judges or organizers for doing a bad job and not being very good at this and this, and are talking on a very unpolite way and doing it very bad. And from my point of view, we have to realize that this can we not accept. We need to find a way so that everybody is treated on a polite and fair level, and that we have also standards that can secure that if, and rules, standard rules, that if a person are acting very much against good behavior, then we have both the power for the judge and the political support from the national boards to say, stop, this is not the way we want our sport to develop. And of course, that is a very sensitive area, but I have the feeling that we need to be sure that we take care of this, and that we show respect to all those organizers and judges that are doing quite a lot of work in this. And of course also, the judges has a big responsibility in this, to handle situations if they appear in a proper way. But this was just to make an example where in the end you could make a kind of a catalog. We already have it in the FEIF, where you have the different offenses, starting with a very small one, coming too late for a discipline too many times, then you may be disqualified from this event. And at the other end of the line we have the very, very bad behavior, mistreating horses, etc., etc., where riders are banned for several years. You probably have read and heard about the case we have at the moment in Sweden, with a Swedish young girl who has been, according to what we have read, using a very tough bit and doing something that has ended up that the Swedish Association gave her 2.5 years, I think it was, banned from taking part in all kinds of events within the Swedish Association. And there the system is like this, that if a person is banned from a country to take part in a competition, then the rules are clear in the statutes that if the country report it to FEIF, then FEIF will register it, and then it counts for all member countries, so that if a person is banned in one country, he or she is automatically also banned in the other countries. This is the rule, and this is of course also something that can be discussed. But from my point of view, it is a very good rule, because we must trust each other so much, so that if a country is saying this is something that this is something that that really is important for this country, then and the country says that we are using fair, understandable, and generally accepted standards for it, then other countries have to say, of course, this is your decision, we respect it. And we should not have discussion whether it should be respected or not. But this is just to give you some ideas about how we are thinking about this issue. Then of course we have WorldFengur. For me it is an extremely important tool for FEIF. through WorldFengur we can secure the registration and purity of the breed, and we can of course add a lot of valuable information to all involved. The owners of the horse, the breeders of the horse, the future buyers of the horses, etc. And when I have the opportunity to show WorldFengur, when I was at a meeting together with people in this European horse network, and I showed them, just pointed out one horse, and then I showed them how I could move around in this, and they were simply losing the whole mouth, because they have never seen anything like that. And therefore I think it's extremely important for us to keep this as something which we really can give to our members. It's very important also for our member countries that they can show that we are giving something which add value directly to the members and to each horse. Of course, we also can get some scientifically knowledge and expertise out of it. We have a lot of data which we in the future can use even more than it has been done so far. And it's also something that can create communication, because people will go in and look at the website and they have talked to another person that could you try to have a look at this horse and so on. So I mean, it's generating interest and communication. I remember, I think it was last year, I was at a competition at home, and then there was a little girl, 12-year-old, sitting, and she was discussing horse breed, and obviously she knew quite a lot. And then she asked an older lady sitting next to her, "Do you have horses in your breed that is out of Rap from Landsmót?" And I mean, this little girl, 12 years old, she has never seen a Rap from Landsmót, but she just found that this was such a big horse, and she found this was interesting to see, and then she wanted to know if, and this was just an idea. And there I also think that this could also be an issue for the youth department to try to make a game from WorldFengur, so that all of the young people can make their own farm, getting information from WorldFengur, try to make their new breeding farms and register it and make a kind of a horse game out of it. And this could be a way of attracting young people to look into breeding and look into the FEIF world, what is going on there. So this was just an idea how we also could combine very specific breeding issues with youth work, for example. Then we have the FEIF Matrix. This is a system where we try, through a description of levels, to put all trainers and instructors into a full, complete system where it is a description of the different competences. And as you can see, we have at the moment more than 1,600 registered instructors, and we have more than 300 trainers at level 2. And this is, of course, there's a lot of detailed information around this, and I'm not able to explain everything about how it's built up, but this is just to show that we want to show the world around us that we are focusing on educating, and that we do have nearly between 1,500 and 2,000 people that has been going through a kind of education, shorter or longer, but they have done it. And this is something that we really can build up in the future. And talking about the youth, this is of course the future. And there we, of course, as you all know, have the Youth Cup and the Youth Camp. And there's a project starting with trying to present some youth exchange possibilities. But I think that we should really focus on how to develop the youth much more in the future. There's a lot of things for us to do for the youngsters. You probably also have heard that, and that's at least what people are talking about in Denmark when talking about how the sports associations in general are developing. That people are not staying very long in the association. They are there until they find this is not interesting anymore, then they change to another thing. And I think it's very important that we try to find ways to attract our young riders to stay in the associations, and we also try to motivate them to continue and take responsibility and go into the work. I mean, they are the ones who should continue. I mean, we are a group of people 50 years and older maybe, or some less, I don't know. But this is just to show that we have quite a challenge there to see how we can encourage the youth to take part in it. This is maybe one of the biggest challenges we have in front of us. I see it at the moment. And this is the question about riders' access to nature, because we see a growing number of restrictions for riders to ride in the nature. I know you also have it here around Reykjavik, that there are certain areas where you're suddenly not allowed to ride, and some pathways are just suddenly closed, etc. And that's the same we see in many of the European countries. And for us that are so much involved with the Icelandic horse, it is extremely important that we can present and show the possibilities for our riders to ride in the nature. Otherwise they could say, if you cannot ride in the nature, then you could as well buy a Norwegian pony or whatever. So therefore it's very important to focus on this and get influence, and that's maybe one of the areas where we, through our cooperation in the European Horse Network, and maybe if we can work a little together with FEI about that also, could focus on this and create a kind of political platform for the Icelandic horse in Europe to be the association that really is focusing on riders' access to nature, because that will be a big issue. I'm very much sure about that. Then we have the World Championship and Landsmót. Seen from my point of view, we have the World Championship and Landsmót as the absolute most important two mega events in the Icelandic horse world. These two events are attracting the whole world. Everybody knows that. We see exciting presentation of the best breeding and sport horses, and also, especially when we talk about Landsmót, we have this characteristic mix of the Icelandic horse culture and history presented together with extremely good horses. We have a unique chance to combine business, tourism, sponsoring and experience in this, and we can, through a setup where we secure that we have Landsmót, like we know Landsmót, and World Championship every other year, because that can generate a process attracting sponsors, securing the organization of the different events, etc., and attracting people to say, okay, next year it's Landsmót, and next year again it's World Championship, and then they can plan their holiday according to that. So that is the reason why we from FEIF have been very much explaining our views in this case. Of course, because of this disease on Iceland and the decision about having Landsmót in 2011. And there you have to realize that, seen from FEIF, we have to take very much care of our organizers, because they feel that if Landsmót will take place in the normal standard of Landsmót, like we all know, a few weeks before the World Championship, it can hurt the World Championship a lot. And as you saw before, we are generating quite some money from the World Championship, and this is of course not in the interest of FEIF. So therefore we have to make our opinion clear and say that we can very, very much understand that Iceland need to have a highlight event every year to present the best breeding horses. This is simply clear to everyone. But we also have to say that from our point of view, if we stick to this this text that the World Championship and Landsmót is the two mega events, then it's very important to say that if we should keep on going, having Landsmót, World Championship every second year, then we need to create some special atmosphere and some special attraction around Landsmót. So therefore, this is the reason why we have presented the opinion like you have seen from the board of FEIF.